Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. University of Pennsylvania. A teacher. I'm going to go to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm going to be involved with public relations for a cork company. Nah. These guys are really good. These young guys, they are talented. I'll become their manager. North Carolina? Nah, I want to get to the Big Apple. I want to be on television. I want to be involved. You know what? I'm going to get involved with TV. I'm going to get involved with movies. I'm going to get involved with being the producer of Morton Downey Show. I'm going to be involved with the Friars Club. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write more than a book. I'm going to write a book on what makes people think. What's the real key to success? And I really have the man who's been successful, the 4-time Emmy Award winner, Bill Boggs. Thank you.
You sound like me after a couple drinks thinking about my life. Thank you. And thank you very much for having me.
So tell me about how the German mother entered Philadelphia and the Scottish man went to Philadelphia. Where'd they arrive from?
Well, my mother's parents were both immigrants who met at a German-American club. I'm half German, half Irish, which makes me say I'm all crazy and half smart.
Right.
They had 5 children. My mother was by far the youngest of the 5. A lot of longevity in the family. That immigrant mother, my mother's lived to be 101. Her brother lived to be 101. My mother lived, God bless her, lived to be 96. And on my father's side of the family, the Boggses, I don't even know, I'd like to find out how long they actually were in Philadelphia before my father was born. And my mother met my father at a carnival.
Somebody was wrestling an alligator.
That's right. As the tale goes, they were at a neighborhood carnival that included one of these crazy attractions of a guy wrestling an alligator. And my mother was saying, oh, this is to the girl, her girlfriend, this is really phony. And my father happened to be sitting right behind them. My mother's very attractive. My father's just a big, handsome guy. So my father leans over and says, no, I know this guy. There actually is some danger involved. So my mother got picked up on my father at a carnival watching a guy wrestle an alligator.
Your father, you said to me, was, I think, above the age to get into the military, correct?
Well, yeah, during World War II, my father had, a couple of children, my sister and I, and also being married and being like age 46 or 47, had a very low deferment number.
Right.
So he was the air raid warden. We still have his air raid warden helmet.
So he was the air raid warden. So there's this picture, we have this Bendix radio when you were 5.
Yes, right.
You were listening, as you said to me, to the golden age of radio.
Well, I consider myself blessed that I'm old enough to have caught the golden age of radio. And what happened was, as a very little kid, 4 or 5 years old, I had this tiny radio that I listened to. And I particularly loved Art Linkletter and People Are Funny, and Arthur Godfrey, and his show. And I just thought, gee, when I grow up, that would be a fun thing to do. So it wasn't like I said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. It was a beeline, but I always was interested in show business my entire life, since I got that radio.
You said to me when you were going to school, you were you went to a large school. Were you the president of the class during high school?
Well, Abraham Lincoln High School, Northeast Philadelphia, 4,400 students, 100-acre campus, tremendous public education. And I was the treasurer, vice president, president of Student Association.
But you were also helping your dad, who was selling the vacuums, right?
Well, my father put me in business. I like to say, if you're from a working class family in Philadelphia, you know how to hustle to make a living. I don't mean shake people down, but I think that my first job was on my bicycle when I was in around 7th grade, selling vacuum cleaner belts and bags door to door. And I made $100 that summer selling, literally, little kid ringing a bell, selling stuff door to door, because my father showed me how to put them on the vacuum cleaner. So I would go in, well, yeah, I can do that. Get your cleaner out. Here's a new belt. Here's a new bag. Give me the money. And I park my bike at the end of the block, do one side, do the other side of the street, get on my bike, ride to another block.
So you graduated high school.
Yeah.
And at that time, you joined before you went to college, you went into the Army Reserve, correct?
No, I went into the Army Reserve between University of
Oh, okay,
Pennsylvania,
we're gonna-
undergraduate and graduate
So
school.
let's go back.
Yeah.
So you're in Philadelphia and you enter the University of Pennsylvania.
Correct.
For literature, correct?
English and sociology, whatever the easiest courses were that I could get through. That was my goal. Somehow I got a scholarship to Penn, and I just thought, wow, this is great. I want to get through, and I want to get to graduate school in communications and get my master's and get some training that would help me in
So you went to Annenberg School of,
Annenberg School of Communication, got a master's degree there. That was great year.
and then you went into the military for 6 months.
No, between Penn and Annenberg, I had this gap because I graduated from high school in January
so-
and graduated from Penn in December. So I had that period of time, did not want to go to Vietnam, did not want to be drafted, did not want to be.
So when were you the substitute teacher?
Once I got my degree from Penn to make money, hustling, I became a substitute teacher. So I taught all the way through graduate school during the time I was with the comedy team. Anytime I needed a buck, I just said I'm available.
So let's talk about this. You graduate, and how do you get to Armstrong Tile in Lancaster, Pennsylvania?
Well, when I got out of Annenberg, my goal was basically to try to find a job in television, in show business. But I think of the larger picture of show business. I went to a film production company. I was knocking on Channel 5, Channel 6, Channel 3, Channel 10, trying to get my foot in the door, and the phone rang. As Gloria Vanderbilt said, your whole life can change with a phone call. And the phone rang, and it was Armstrong Cork Company, now Armstrong World Products. They recruited me. And they said, we have a very creative job for you. It involves shooting films. It involves writing speeches.
In the Amish country.
Yeah, this is big Fortune 500 company out there in Amish country. And I rationalized, wow, this is like show business. I can get a car. I won't be living with my parents. I can't believe I'll make this much money. Sure. And after about 3 months or less, really, I realized I'd made a phenomenal mistake by settling to take that job rather than continue to try to get into television.
Everything is meant to be.
That's correct.
Okay, so what happens is you meet these two guys.
No, well, one guy, Jay Tarsus, I actually encouraged to come to Armstrong because he was working for Alan Funt, had a daughter, Jamie Tarsus, who would go on to be president of ABC Broadcasting. She was two years old. A son on the way. I said, come down here. They've got creative jobs. It's boring, but you're going to make some money and regroup. So Tarsus comes down, ends up sitting next to a guy named Tom Patchett. They start writing comedy routines out of boredom. One day, walking down the hall, they're doing a routine. What is it? We're writing these comedy routines. And in those days, there were great sketch comedians. You had Stiller and Meara, Ronan Martin, Mike Nichols, Elaine May. I said, do another routine. In the middle of this routine, I had a blinding revelation. This is hand to God true. They're great. I love comedy, right? We'll go into show business. I'll be their agent. And 6 months later, they were on the Merv Griffin Show, making their national television debut. They went on to be hugely successful.
You could have been an agent. Forget TV.
I was a manager.
I know. That's what I'm saying. You were an agent.
No,
okay.
I actually ended up being their manager. The agent was a guy named Irvin Arthur.
So you become their manager. You get them booked over
A lot of bookings.
And
yeah.
they do rather well.
Really well.
And then Bernie Brillstein, you said?
Well, what happened was we were doing extremely well. The comedy team was called Patchett and Tarsus. And we were set to move to the West Coast, and they were creating a new morning show in Philadelphia. And Debbie Miller, who was working for the Mike Douglas show, and had been trained by Roger Ailes, who was executive producer of Mike Douglas at that time, came to me and said, look, I think you have it within you to be a great TV producer. Really? He said, yeah. I'd like you to be my associate producer on this new morning show. We're replacing Tom Snyder. I said, Debbie, geez, that's really flattering, but I'm set to move to the West Coast with Patchett and Tarsus. Make a long story short, the question that changed my life was, what would it take for you to stay? And I said, you told me the show's going to have a host and 5 people, and one of those people will be on TV 1 day a week. You let me be your associate producer of one of those people. No auditioning. I know I can do it. I'll find another manager for Patchett and Tarsus, and I'll stay here. And so I ended up contacting Bernie Brillstein. Bernie Brillstein ended up with Brillstein Gray. They went on to the West Coast, stopped performing, and became the head writers for Bob Newhart. Made a lot of money.
Now you're over there. You're the producer, one of the producers, and you're also the talent.
On once a week.
Once a week.
Mr. Weekend. That was my first job on television.
So you have Mr. Weekend. So what happens next? How's Mr. Weekend end up in North Carolina?
Well, Mr. Weekend was on, first off, my job was Mr. Weekend in Philadelphia in the early 70s, telling people what to do on the weekend, which was primarily get out of town in those days in Philadelphia, go to New York, not now. But what happened was it wasn't enough. I mean, it was like playing for the Phillies, batting once a week. So I made a New Year's resolution, which I'm big at, making resolutions and sticking to it, that I would go anywhere in America to get my own show. And I really just started telling everybody. A friend of mine said, wake up in the morning as if you already have your show. Told everybody. And one thing led to another. Within 3 weeks, I got a call to audition. Went to High Point, North Carolina. Replaced Farm, Home, and Garden. Produced my own show called Southern Exposure with Bill Boggs. And beat the Today Show 3 years.
So what was Southern Exposure with Bill Boggs?
A 1 hour, live, morning, 9 in the morning talk show. That was produced by me. So sometimes we'd have maybe Dan Rather was on, I'd have him for the whole show. Sometimes we'd have cooking segments and it would be like a magazine show. Whatever I thought would work. We'd had live music. I'd go over to the Greensboro Coliseum and interview Sonny and Cher. I have film of Sonny and Cher with little Chastity on their lap, the Jackson 5, any act that came to town. The show ended up getting syndicated thanks to Phil Lombardo throughout the South and did extremely well.
So you're there 3 years, right?
3 amazingly happy creative years.
So what happens? You have the bug to get back to Philly or to the Big Apple?
No, well, what happened was the show made noise. I mean, you had this guy doing Southern Exposure that was beating the Today Show from the first show and syndicated a couple other stations. So I was sought out by Miami, San Francisco, and New York, Channel 5, WNEW in those days. And I decided to come to New York, and that was how I got here. Yeah.
So you come to New York, and
right.
What do you get then? Is it midday at that time, or is it?
Yeah, it was Midday Live, which I added with Bill Boggs to it, and so that's how I got to New York. But the first thing was interesting when I came to New York, Michael, was really immersing myself in New York culture. Now, in North Carolina, I lived out in Thomasville. I had a house, a swimming pool, 250 acres behind me. Was doing the show that I had complete control over, had 7 weeks a year off because I taped one extra show a week. And people said to me, how could you stand living in North Carolina? That's when I saw a certain provincialism that only a Philadelphian can spot in New Yorkers.
So you come to New York.
Yeah.
You're on midday, and then after midday you had another show.
Well, during the midday years, which is 13 years, I hosted a game show for CBS. I hosted a cable show for CBS, a late night thing called Upstairs at Xenon. Richard Baker and I produced shows for MTV. I host and co-executive produced Comedy Tonight for 2 years, 120 stations, and other stuff. We had a couple of specials for NBC. So the 13-year period of midday, and I did weekend. I did what was the Saturday Morning Live? I was really busy. I really worked hard, really hard. At one point, I was on camera 9 7-day weeks. 63 straight days.
Now, then Mr. Rupert Murdoch decides to buy Metro Media.
No, yes, that's correct. And it became Fox.
Became Fox.
That's right.
And then you returned back home for a little while.
Well, what happened was, so they canceled midday, which I was very happy. Honestly, Michael, I was really happy to see what else life had to offer after 13 years. And I went to the West Coast. I worked with Dick Clark trying to develop something. That didn't happen. And after about 9 months, my son Trevor was out in the West Coast with his mother Linda. I realized I got to get back to work, had to make some money. So I went back on the air in the interviewer's chair in Philadelphia with a show called Time Out.
Right. So from Time Out, how do you get, because you were one of the people involved with the first shows on the Food Network.
Well, there's a big jump between Time Out in Philadelphia to the Food Network. And what happened was, I got sick. I had been interviewing people considering North Carolina and New York for 18 straight years. And there was this day, I'll never forget it. I'm interviewing the Chippendales for the 18th time in my career. And with this shaved, greasy chest. And I'm asking the same stupid questions. And the women in the audience are screaming the same stupid stuff. And I thought, it's time to do something different. So once again, I made a resolution that I would just want to change my life, and I became executive producer of the Morton Downey
Right.
Jr.
So-
that was a long way from Food Network.
So the Morton Downey Jr. show did exceptionally well, but Morton Downey was his own worst enemy.
Yes, he was extremely self-destructive.
And then after the Morton Downey Jr. show, what came next?
Well, then I worked at a job which I was not well suited, but I was under the umbrella of Bob Pittman's company, right? And so they were launching something called Court TV with Steve Brill, a genius guy from American Lawyer. And so I was the executive producer who helped form what became Court TV, that ultimately was purchased and then became True Television. But it was not a good fit for me, as I did not have a natural inclination and interest in the judicial system, except staying out of jail.
Okay, so
when
did you write the novel?
The novel At First Sight was written in 1980, in the middle of the years. It was Grosset and Dunlap, and Renee Zellweger actually optioned it a few years ago together with my...
So what shows were you doing at Court TV over there?
I did no shows. I was executive producer helping launch it. And after that ended amicably with Steve Brill, I decided I wanted to get back on television. Then I had a fallow period of really not making enough money. Fortunately, I had savings. I did all-night radio on WOR. And I was interested in food, always interested in the concept of interviewing people and eating at the same time, which we did on midday. We'd have these round tables. And so I started to, my agent got me an audition for NBC, WNBC. And so for 2 years, I was anchor of Weekend Today in New York. That was only working, Saturday and Sunday. So the rest of the time, I was just trying to hustle around, make some more money. And when I heard that the Food Network was being created, I went to them and said, look, you need me. I have been doing a radio show on food, which I was doing on the side, and so re-show. And
so when did you decide, because I know that the one-man show, which you still do today,
Talk Show Confidential?
Yes.
I have to say I'll be doing that play at Guildhall August 25th, Talk Show Confidential. Guildhall in East Hampton. Let's see. I was working for the Food Network. The Food Network had 3 different shows. And Robin Leach was hosting something called Food Network Live, which was all very labor intensive, and he didn't want to do it anymore. So I took over that. So I was working on the weekends going around the country. And one of the chefs we were working with was Jacques Pepin. And Jacques Pepin, this beautiful, handsome man, his accent says, Bill, you should go on Crystal Cruises. They would love you as a speaker. You're such a good storyteller. You must meet them. So I was on the West Coast, and I'm driving over to meet Crystal Cruises, thinking, what can I talk about? All right, I'll make up something. Talk Show Confidential, Confessions of a Talk Show Host. I've got these funny, true stories. So I went on one cruise, and I've been doing it ever since, 1 or 2 cruises a year. I've now got 6 talks. And I came back, Michael, and the talk I gave, Confessions of a Talk Show Host, went over so well. I said to myself, I have it in me to do more on stage. And so I created a full-blown off-Broadway show, which was underwritten on a theater on 42nd Street. And then Peter Martin at the Triad Theater loved it. And he picked it up and said, Bill, you can do it here as long as you want. So for 6 years, once a week and then once a month, with various changes, I did Talk Show Confidential, Confessions of a Talk Show Host at the Triad Theater, while doing lots of other things. I've always loved stage work, stage performing. I've been in a couple of musicals, I've been in plays, and I've always loved that feeling of a live audience. And it's still, to this day, my favorite thing to do.
Now, when you wrote this book, which was 2007, but you started before, how did you decide to write the book about key to success for people?
When I interviewed Frank Sinatra back in 1975. I got to know Sinatra. And he occasionally would watch the show. When he was at the Waldorf, he says to me, your show, midday, it's like the Today Show for me. I wake up maybe, if I'm lucky, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're on. So we had Yitzhak Rabin, the former prime minister of Israel, who sadly was assassinated, on midday. And 4 days later, I was at a party over on the East Side with Jilly, Frank, a few other people. And Frank wanted to know all about Yitzhak Rabin. He had seen the show. And not the politics stuff. Sinatra wanted to cut to the chase. Why in Israel this country with tough women and tough men. Why did that guy rise to the top? And I got no answer. I'm fumphing around. And Sinatra says, listen, Billy, if you're going to be interviewing people, doing this all your life, paraphrasing, you have a unique opportunity to study these people. Take notes. Told me about how he used to study Dorsey, the breathing technique, Buddy Rich, stuff like that, rhythms. So Sinatra got me interested in going beyond doing the interview, as you're doing now, and really studying the lives of people. So I had whom I was interviewing. So, Michael, I had this idea for a book called Success Secrets of Successful People. I had it for many years. I was at a party at the Four Seasons restaurant, The Value of Showing Up, met the president of Collins Books, who happened to be a fan of mine, meaning that he was very interested in my career. He and his kids used to watch me on Saturday Morning Live, blah, blah, blah. I told him I had an idea. One thing led to another, Michael, and I wrote Got What It Takes, Successful People, to feel how they made it to the top.
So how do you get to these 42 successful people?
Oh, that's the easy part. When I started out as a talent coordinator, produced my own show, Comedy Tonight. We booked 453 comedians. I know how to book people.
So you,
if I were hosting a talk show now, that's what I do. I book people.
So you booked the 42 people for the book.
Sure.
So, part of what you've also been doing the last couple of years is you've been with Vistage, right?
I've been since I wrote the book, which is about success and self-empowerment, right? Since I wrote the book, there was a demand for me to speak. People wanted, we'll talk about the book, motivate us, give a keynote. And so I fell in with Vistage, which is a CEO organization. I've given about 150 talks around the country based on the book about how to get the best out of yourself one day at a time. And I always had the dream that in maybe like what you call the third act of your life, that I could use this intellectual property of having interviewed thousands of amazingly successful people to help other people. So that's a little bit of what I'm doing now too.
We have a picture of you at Jazz at Lincoln Center. You've been involved.
I do a lot of MC work. That's me with the great Monty Alexander, the 2 nights of remembering Jillies. He says to me, you're one of the few people around who actually remembers Jillies. I never think of myself like that, but I guess I am, you know.
So of the people that you've interviewed in your career, who was the most interesting? Was it Frank?
Other than Sinatra, all right, we don't have a picture of this, but you can find one of him. Philippe Petit walked between the World Trade Centers. There was 2 movies done on it. Man on Wire, this is the documentary, and the other one, The Wire. I interviewed him the morning after the walk. That was unbelievable. It was to hear this man say, I was attached to that wire. It didn't make any difference if I was 10 feet off the ground or 1,000 feet off the ground. I knew I was not going to fall. To have him tell the story of the bow and arrow, shooting the rope across for the first time is something that sent chills down my spine, particularly because I have a fear of heights. Horrible fear of heights.
But now, you know, as I failed to say that we're both fellow friars, you're active in the Friars Club also.
Well, the Friars Club, you know, anybody in show business in New York area should want to be in the Friars Club. And I'm fortunate to be an officer together with Jerry Lewis and Larry King, a couple other people who are officers of the club. Friars Club means a lot. It's, you know, people just think of it as a place that has these big roasts, but probably on a week-in, week-out basis, they have more intellectual and entertainment activities than any other club in New York. I mean, all manner of stuff, plus great food.
So let's talk about two other important things in your life. One is Trevor, and the other thing is Jane.
Right, well, take them in that order. My son, Trevor Boggs, born on Shakespeare's birthday, and a unique ability verbally, set his sights on being a successful writer. Only thing I can brag about him is that they had to take an ERB test to get into the little Episcopal school when they were, 4 years old. The teacher called me. I was at Court TV. She said, I got to tell you about your son's score. I said, what? Uh-oh. She said, he scored beyond measurement in verbal acuity. We've never had a child in the history of school score this well verbally at age 4.
That's Trevor, and
That's
let's
my
talk
son.
about Lady Jane.
Well, what can I say? What I want to say to anybody watching right now, one of the great keys to life is finding a person with whom you are tremendously, happily compatible. My mother told me a long time ago, and she was right, and it took me a long time to learn this, a relationship should not be a lot of work. And so Jane and I met in a mystical thing 3 days after my mother was buried, in that mystical way that people think dead people make things happen.
Right.
I often think my mother sent her to me. I like to think that. It makes me feel good. Jane Rothschild, native of New York, real estate, something you're a tiny bit familiar with, just a heart of gold, smart, clever, funny, related to Sammy Kahn. She's hip, knows music. Just brings out the best in me.
So,
that's it.
You know, fortunately, the radio, because the radio produced everything, and I'm happy that I had you as my guest today. Thank you for being here.
My God, this was fun. Michael, thank you. Thank you very much.
And I got